Hello everyone and welcome back to House, the Shared Living podcast. This is the 7th episode in season 4 and today it's a very different kind of day because we're actually all together in person physically in a podcast studio in London. I'm Deanie Lee from the Property Marketing Strategists.
I'm Dan Smith from Resi Consultancy.
And I'm Sarah Canning from the Property Marketing Strategists.
And before we go on, we just have a quick word from our headline sponsor.
Season 4 of Housed is sponsored by mystudenttools.com. List your properties commission-free and reach thousands of students searching for their university home.
Dan and the team from My Student Halls have been supporters of House since the beginning, and we are truly, really incredibly grateful that they're here once again as headline sponsors of Season 4. Their student accommodation listing site is easy for students to search and easy for operators to list. So if you haven't already done so, make sure that you are listed. And also a huge thank you to our sponsors Utopia and Wash Station. More from them later. After recording today, because we are all together, we're going to be having a bit of a strategy session about House. So it's a really good time to encourage you all to get in touch with us and continue to give feedback about the topics you want to hear more or less about, or any of the experts you want to hear more from. And most importantly, any sponsors wanting to work with us in Season 5 from September, we literally couldn't do this without our wonderful sponsors, so please do get in touch if you would like to partner with us. Right, so last week we spoke a little bit about kind of our views on UKREiiF and how we found the event. We got quite a lot of feedback from that last episode, but Dan, did you want to give us a bit of an update on that?
So we got a huge amount of feedback from the podcast last week, and we had a chat with Matt Christie. So we are going to be continuing conversations with Matt and the team at UKREiiF because we do feel that PBSA needs more representation. Now, there's only so much that the team at UKREiiF can do because all of the tents are typically taken by sponsors, and those sponsors then decide exactly who goes into the sessions and onto the panels. But to have 1 hour and 15 minutes across 3 days, I think there is very much the awareness that that's not quite enough for PBSA in particular. I also think there's probably more that needs to be done on BTR and co-living. So if we can end up with some kind of hub or some kind of a tent, maybe a sponsored tent, possibly a housed tent. We've already had, expressions of interest from the likes of Student Crowd, Class Foundation, Amber, and several others who have sort of said that they might be interested in supporting that. Very keen to take that forward. So we'll continue those conversations with Matt Christie and the team at UKREiiF just to see if we can get a hub for the shared living sector so that everybody can come and network, and we can put a load of sessions on and really make sure that PBSA especially is represented, but also that BTR and co-living are top of the agenda too. So yeah, watch this space. It's definitely something that we're passionate about.
Yeah, I think there was a flurry of messages between us last week about all of the exciting things that we could include. A little bit of trepidation because even just attending UKREiiF is exhausting, and we're like, oh my God, what are we letting ourselves in for? Like we're, putting our hands up to say that, we'll help organise something. So yeah, we're going into it with our eyes open, but we'd very much like to, do what the sector wants really. So yeah, if anyone else has got any other ideas about how we can bring that to life, then let us know, and we will be organising that meeting with the team from UKREiiF.
Yeah, I think ultimately it's going to be a lot of work, and the more that we can pull together and work with everyone and bring the things that I guess people don't normally see or think is missing is where we want to be really. So I think any ideas on that and any help and support, it'll be for all the sector. So it is exciting. It is a lot of work, but watch this space. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, I think part of this is also, I think there's just that huge lack of representation for PBSA in particular. There is no one body that oversees PBSA, not oversees it, represents it, either in government or things like this. And that is where we're really missing a trick. We've got to get something off the ground there. So again, watch this space. Sarah, Deanie and I will continue talking about that. And thanks very much to everyone who's reached out to discuss that as well.
Yeah, huge amount of support for doing that.
Which is great. So thank you to all our listeners for that support. We'll just have a quick break to hear from one of our sponsors.
Wash Station proudly sponsor this episode of Housed. We provide best-in-class laundry solutions that complement your buildings. Wash Station. Smart, green, clean.
So there was a new article that I saw this week around that the government are going to implement AI in planning departments, which is brilliant, I think. And I'm sure, Dan, you're going to have a lot to say on this topic.
No, of course not.
But I just thought, planning is one of the big barriers that we've got in the sector. it is so slow. It's taken years to get anything through planning. Their deadlines are being missed and no one even cares anymore because they know the deadlines are going to be missed. So it seems like a massive step forward and a great initiative by the government to do this. But I just thought, you're very much pro AI and I'm pro AI, but I kind of think that there's still a lot to learn about pro AI, and it's kind of what are the risks and benefits around the use of this technology. I think one of the things that I worry about is that when you use technology, there's formulas and algorithms and things that make it very easy to pass whatever checks and balances they're looking for. And therefore, do we end up with this planning process that is all just ticking boxes and actually not really about what the local environment needs, what people need? So I guess that's my fear and my worry. But in terms of speeding it up and making it better, it sounds like a dream come true.
Well, I mean, maybe they've been working off AI in the planning department in Coventry or Nottingham or Sheffield for the last five years or so. Look, I see it as a positive thing because it is embracing the future, and AI can really speed up a lot of those manual processes and the admin side of things. So this AI tool that they're implementing, I don't actually know exactly what it is. I'm assuming it's sort of a bit more internal rather than them purchasing a specific suite from somewhere. But it will scan hundreds of files in seconds. And that's ultimately going to mean that rather than a planning department sitting through that, and we know that they are short-staffed already, planning departments are really short-staffed, they can get someone doing the grunt work for them. And that is what the AI is ultimately there to do. So really making sure that during the application process, all of those boxes have been checked. That's half the battle. If AI can do that just by scanning it in and uploading it, and then AI providing a summary and going through those checkboxes, that's going to make a massive difference to the timelines. Yes, you could still get snarled up in the rest of the planning process. So we do still need root and branch review and of the planning regime, and we need to reform it completely. But this is definitely a positive step in the right direction. And I'm not Elon Musk. I don't advocate for completely getting rid of, government departments. And I do think that there is an opportunity here to take the positives from AI and make sure that can be implemented to speed up that planning process. That's where AI should be benefiting. But you do still need those checks and balances as it goes further down the line of, having your typical planning officer really have a good look over things. It can't just be a case of, send that through AI and all of a sudden you've got planning approved. It's really got to still be part of a thorough process, but God, we could speed it up so much quicker.
I guess I've listened to both of you, and my view on it really is that I think when Labour came into power and they had these ambitious targets, they talked about increasing planning departments across the country and increasing people to get this through anyway. So part of me is thinking, well, isn't that a shame that maybe the employment opportunities aren't going to be there if we're replacing humans with AI? So there was an opportunity there to create lots of job roles, which now isn't going to be there if they're using AI.
I mean, they said they were going to put 300 planning officers in, and that is a drop in the ocean. That's great. They
could
should
have that
be
in one city.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Genuinely, you could have that in one city. So why not then have those as senior planning officers working with the AI? And this is what every single job role is going to be. It's going to be how you manage AI agents and how you manage your AI within your company, within your local authority, whatever it might look like. And I think it's actually really refreshing to see the government push this to local authorities as well and say, look, we've done this great thing for you here. It's going to speed up your planning applications, etc. We can continue to do this in other departments. I do think that is a huge opportunity for AI. And I'm not promoting Verbaflow here in any way, shape or form. We're not here to digitize and streamline the planning departments, although I'm sure that might be something down the line. But there is just such an opportunity here to really streamline, make sure everything is as efficient as it possibly can be without necessarily saying, right, okay, don't hire those 300 extra planning officers, because to be fair, we probably needed 3,000. I would have said that's what I thought when it first came out. And
Well, I did speak to a family member who is a planning officer, and he said it doesn't even cover the vacancies they currently have.
Exactly.
So it was just a drop in the ocean. And I think actually reflecting on it, what actually this could do is give that creativity back to planning departments, which I think they've lost because they're so bogged down in just get through this, just get through the task. And actually they've missed the bit of the planning because they're just ticking boxes and getting through things. So hopefully that's a positive step.
Although when I read it, I kind of was thinking, to your point, Deanie, that you said about it being a tick box exercise, will it take creativity out of the design of buildings? Because if there's something that isn't in the box, is it going to be a computer says no situation whereby, if there's something that isn't pre-populated as part of, the AI process that doesn't fit in a box, is it going to get either missed or rejected because AI might not be able to understand something that's completely new and exciting and innovative?
That's what I worry is the risk is. But what I'm hoping is if you've got people that have more time, that they're able to actually look at the results of the AI and go, well, hang on a minute, you shouldn't have rejected that because of this, or this is quite interesting. So actually, I'm going to go and explore this. So hopefully in my rosy world, that is what will happen. But
I think you're right. I do think you're right. I think that's the ultimate goal, surely. And it will be flagged. I would say anything that is slightly either controversial or a bit too innovative for the AI to understand. And I've just checked, actually, it's Google DeepMind's Gemini model. So it's very legitimate. It's built off of, a very credible platform. I think that then making sure that you've got that human interaction to be able to catch some of those things, that's absolutely key. But we have no idea yet as to what that will look like. Are we just going to end up with big square boxes, or are we going to be able to be fairly innovative? I think obviously the architects and the designers are going to be really keen for there not to be this sort of cookie cutter approach, as you've said previously. It's got to be still innovative, exciting design. It can't just be that, okay, well, this worked for the last place, I'm just going to stick that in, and that's just going to be a tick box exercise.
I think that is the risk, that actually it's developers stop innovating because they think, I can get it through and it's easy to get it through. And that is the worry, that is kind of like, well, actually, and then that impacts architects because architects are going to go, well, I'm being told to do this because that's what the client's paying. So I've always thought that we all should have a wish and want for our local communities to be in keeping with where we live, that deliver for the people that live there. And we haven't had that in the planning department for God knows how long. And I think you're right, is that actually if the government can go down this route and do more around using AI to kind of stop those gaps, but it gives, having been a civil servant, one of the biggest issues I always find in civil service is that it's always the computer says no kind of thing. It's not actually, I'm an individual that's accountable for this decision and I'm going to make a decision based on understanding all the facts because it's the computer says no. And actually, using AI, we're able to actually give people more accountability as human beings, then that's a positive thing.
I think, you've just got me thinking there about architects and designers in particular. Is this advent of AI, and if this is going to be a tick box exercise, and we're hopeful that it's not, but from what we're seeing and reading, it looks like it will be effectively along those lines. Will it mean that developers just skip architects? I know, I really hope not. And all of and we know there's a lot of architects that listen to this. My worry is that we will then end up with developers that's a very, very different skill set to an architect or a designer, just effectively doing their own thing, creating what they think will get passed rather than what
copy and paste. If it worked through the last round, why would you not just submit exactly the same again if you know that AI passed it the first time?
And then it saves you on the architect's fees and the design fees, and that is a major worry for me and for obviously the design sector. But I would like to think there would have to be some kind of, you can't just design a 700-bed PBSA asset with no architect or design or interior design input at all. So hopefully there will be some kind of prerequisites for each of the applications, that it's been through certain, I don't know how you would manage or control that. I don't know. I really want to see this. So I'm going to start asking to have a look at what that portal is going to look like. It will start coming in, I think it said July 2026. So spring 2026. So we've got a little while yet. Hopefully there'll be some kind of heads up to developers, architects, and that they actually involve people in that process rather than just say, hey, give it to the planning officers and away you go. Actually, it should be the people who are going to be using that in the way that, we're going to be putting the applications in. They're the ones who should be being, who should be informing the design of this rather than the planning officers just themselves. So might be a bit of lobbying to do. Who the hell's going to do that lobbying? I don't know, but we'll have a go ourselves.
And I guess as the general public should probably be a little bit more forceful in actually what they want. And I guess as you change supply and demand, then actually they do have the ability to be more forceful, I think, because we've got this housing crisis that people don't really have a choice about living in this place or that place. It's just, I've got to live here. So hopefully it will be a positive thing, and we'll start to see some innovative and the planning kind of barrier will hopefully not be a barrier anymore, because that is one of our biggest issues. Right, we'll just have a quick break to hear from our sponsor. Thank you.
This episode is brought to you by UKREiiF, the smart building platform that helps real estate owners protect the value of their assets.
From ESG compliance to energy efficiency and resident engagement, UKREiiF turns real-time data into action, making buildings better for people, planet and profit.
If you're in asset management or operations and care about performance, UKREiiF is your essential partner. Find out more at utopi.co.uk. That's utopi.co.uk.
Once again, UKREiiF for sponsoring this season. We do appreciate all our sponsors' help, so thank you. So I know, Sarah, you have been digesting the new Build to Rent report from Homeviews. What have you found in that report?
Well, firstly, it's a great report, and anybody that's got any interest in the shared living sector should download it. I'm not going to talk through every single point because there's so much to cover. What I really like about it is that it covers co-living and single family. What it calls is true BTR, and then it compares to the wider PRS sector as well. And whilst the data is taken from the satisfaction and the ratings and the reviews of residents living in the buildings, Homeviews are taking that data and creating their own report about it. So Deanie asked me earlier when I was talking about this, well, do people know that they're living in a BTR building or a co-living? And I'm like, no, they don't, but Homeviews does. So they have taken the data and they have categorised it rather than people, because as we know, they wouldn't know, and that nor should they. So the data is from, I think, over 22,500 reviews from 758 communities around the UK. And it talks a little bit about the satisfaction of it, but also of the facilities. So value for money, that was really, really interesting, because there's been an increase in the ratings of value. And on the other side of things, London BTR, despite making up 43% of all BTR, their residents are slightly less satisfied than the rest of the UK. So I was thinking, how does this fit in? Is it just a volume thing? Or is it that there's it's some of it's a little bit older. You probably have a much more wider breadth of price points and facilities as well. So, that I thought was quite interesting, because the numbers spread around the rest of the UK are quite low. So obviously, whatever people say in London is going to have the majority impact on those results. One thing that I found really interesting as well is that co-living is outperforming ratings compared to other BTR subcategories. Again, co-living is really relatively small as a subsector, so that's probably going to skew it. And I'd say that the co-living developments that we've seen come through probably only in the last couple of years. So again, they're rating very, very new, shiny, products really. One thing that I think, Dan, I think you'd love this because you've talked about it a lot. They actually have compared the satisfaction between in-house management versus third-party management and whether that makes a difference to the resident experience. And it doesn't really in this report. It's very, very, very minimal. And I know that we've been obviously asking our audience for ideas to talk about in the podcast. And one that came through this morning was about that operational and management fees. And, well, actually, how would an investor pick? And, should it be done by this? And I thought, actually, this is a really, really great barometer for an investor as to how their operator is performing. But, yeah, I think it's great that there's no difference, really.
Yeah, me too. And I think that what's interesting from this Homeviews report, and we should just say, so Homeviews is owned by Rightmove. They sold out relatively recently. Fair play to them. Did very well. And it's a review site very similar to Student Crowd, but obviously focused on BTR, co-living, etc., single-family housing. Management is the differentiator. across BTR and co-living. And, I think it's coming down less to sort of design amenities, and it's more sort of focused on how are you made to feel when you enter into the property, and how is that by your resident concierge or the general manager or whoever that might be. I think that's becoming, increasingly more important. Now, in a world of AI, we are very focused on those human interactions because it's about how you live and who you meet and who you speak to and how you curate that community. And I think that, coming to your point, one of the questions we had off the back of us talking today was about, what are those key differentiators and what are investors looking for, And I can tell you now, from having done quite a few tender processes and having a lot of different investor clients where I oversee the management of those properties and effectively oversee the third-party operator, it is very varied. And you have to adjust as a management operator based on what the investor want. Just done a value proposition piece for an operator, helping them to just define exactly what their value proposition should be going out to investors. And I had to really say to them, look, sometimes your investor is just going to want the highest possible gross revenue. That can be a thing. Sometimes they are going to be very focused on the NOI, and all in all, you need to adjust your approach accordingly. You have to be able to say, right, well, we are going to reduce our operating costs to a certain level, but my feedback to this operator in particular was, do not bastardize your brand by saying, yeah, look, we're just going to win this business. We're going to have the lowest possible OPEX and we're going to have the highest possible revenue. We need the fees. We want the business. We'll get to scale and then see where we're at. I don't think that washes anymore. And quite clearly coming through from this report is that the residents in particular are so focused on that management and how they feel when they're in the building, rather than, oh, hey, we've got this cinema room, this media room, this podcast studio, this whatever. So I think there's going to be a lot of value proposition work on a individual property level, but also from a lot of third-party operators on a brand level too. So, I mean, hopefully there's a lot of consultancy for us all to pick up along the way. But yeah, there's got to be this renewed focus on what are you actually delivering? Why should the resident actually say that they are giving you 5 out of 5 for that experience?
Well, the demand for facilities came out really, really strongly, and it's exactly what you just said. So the top demand for facilities were actually fully managed, transport links, well connected, flexible tenancies, 24-hour maintenance, and they all came way, way higher than any amenities. And even then, the top amenities were parking and storage before any of, I guess we'd call kind of, the luxury community amenity space. And then when you get further and further down that list, the gym was the most popular, but cinema room, games room, private dining room are way, way down the list. I'm not saying that people don't enjoy them because the ratings would suggest that they do, but they're not looking for it. It's not, important to them. So if you're trying to match, I guess, your marketing and your proposition to what people are looking for, you've got to get those top things right first. And yeah, if you've got a cinema room and a, podcast studio, then it's a bonus. Yeah. But what was interesting as well is gym, pet friendly and co-working facilities do appear in the top 10 rated developments. So they might not have been, rating gym as the top thing that they're looking for, but it adds to the experience and they're very happy in a building. I can't remember who we were talking to about this, and I don't know if it was on the podcast. I don't know if it was you, Dan, or you, Deanie, or somebody else. Answers on a postcard. But we were talking about why BTR might be really popular with students, and being able to bring your own pet was really up there from whoever said it. So that's got to be considered as well. And then the inquiries about the lease lengths also came up in this report. Most inquire about a 12-month lease, but there's also a demand for 6 months. I think off the top of my head, it was between 15 and 20% looking for 6 months. And then there's even demand for people looking for over 24 months as well. We're doing a lot of reviews at the moment in student accommodation, particularly, and and university accommodation as well, and we keep drumming that home about the flexible leases. And I think a lot of the time people think a flexible lease is, offering between 42 and 51 weeks. Let's be honest, that's not the, clearly that's not the flexibility that people, are looking for. And, moving forward with the Renters' Rights Bill and HMOs being able to offer more flexibility, we'd really, really like to see that in PBSA, because BTR are already doing it and there is a demand for it as well. This is all of their data from 2024. I think possibly not 2025, but I think if they were to do it again in 2026, after the Renters' Rights Bill settled down, that lease length thing might well change even more. So anyway, I'm not going to regurgitate any more of the data from the Homeviews report because there was loads of it. I found it really, really interesting, and I'd love to see that level of detail in PBSA. We've got some great organisations that are doing bits of it, but I haven't seen anything to, that in depth.
I might regurgitate some of the other data. But I just wanted to say, going back to our kind of planning conversation around cookie cutter, all this stuff we know, we've found it in our research, and it's still the same thing still being built. And it's kind of actually, guys, let's stop sitting on our laurels and let's actually start changing things and doing things differently, because the data is all there, it's all clear to see. So let's do things differently. And the only other thing I wanted to discuss was the reasons around home ownership. And Homeviews did ask the question of why do you want to own a home? And I think what was really interesting they talk about in their report is that all of those top 3 reasons, which is have a place that truly feels like mine, more freedom to decorate and personalise, and to feel a sense of stability and security. And it's that one that was 78% for 18 to 34-year-olds and 67% for 35 to 54-year-olds, that this is a marketing problem, because you have got a sense of stability and security in a BTR building, but people aren't aware of that, and they're saying that's the reason they want to buy a home. And if we really want to truly change things, then we've really got to get stronger at that message to say that actually you don't need to worry about moving. And there's another one in there around live without fear of evictions, or rent increases. So they're 2 separate things, really. But yeah, it's kind of we do need to get this messaging out.
And that messaging has to change. And I think the great thing about BTR is that BTR and co-living have shown how quickly they can pivot certain properties and entire brands towards students. So we know that, you could just change that messaging very quickly. And obviously there's a reason that a lot of students are choosing BTR. And I think that BTR, I was having a good conversation with Scott Lewis, actually, from Homes for Students the other day, when I was on a boat with Scott and a few others.
Not for very long,
no,
you may add.
No, I must just say. And big thanks to the UKREiiF team for inviting me onto the boat for the Dot Group Regatta, a very short-lived sailing experience, to be completely honest. We broke our foresail which sounds incredibly painful, within sort of 5 minutes of getting out there. The first tack just ripped it straight off of the mast. But anyway, yes, so I was chatting to Scott Lewis and we were talking about how to stabilise BTR. Riveting conversation that it was. But I was saying to Scott that I think that actually there's a huge amount of students in BTR. He knows that I think that. And we were kind of discussing what that should look like after, a few stabilised years, effectively. And I know that there is... Scott's obviously got a good view of it because he sees Verve Life, and he sees that actually the first year, yes, you will probably end up with more students, but then that will kind of dissipate and it should start to stand on its own 2 feet with a much more of a sort of self-imposed cap. And I think that is something that BTR has been really clever to kind of pivot towards students in that way. And I think that that's where we also need, we need to be talking about the flexibility side of things within BTR, but also then within PBSA. And I think that comes back to that sort of era of flexibility that we're moving into. I really want to ensure that we can push that out, because you're right, Sarah, it's not just the 44 and the 51 weeks. And that's, hey, we'll show a bit of flexibility. We'll drop from 51 to 44 weeks. I think we're going to need to go quite a bit further this year, especially.
But based on that, I'm just wondering, the people that are demanding 24 months, what if they're students? Because they might spend their first year in university accommodation, which we know is kind of generally the accepted route in most cities and most universities. After that, are particularly undergraduates who are from abroad that are not based in the UK, where else do they go? Maybe they don't have anywhere else to go. And they're maybe the ones that are saying, I want 24 months. I know that I'm going to be here for another 2 years. And PBSA does not offer that. I mean, yes, I'm sure that a lot of you will say, well, we do because you can rebook. And it's like, yeah, but you're rebooking on the basis of 51 weeks. They don't know that when you say 51 weeks, you're probably going to go, all right, stay for the 52nd week. But if you're not telling them that at the point that they're rebooking, they don't know that. It's not a 2-year contract. You know, that could be another reason why students are looking to BTR.
Again, that's research that we've done, and we've got the data to say that we know students want to book for the life of their tenancy, their course. So yes, we know that is something that is there, and we've told the sector that.
And we've not seen it in PBSA.
No. And you know what? Really, that's really interesting. So we need flexibility both ways. We can't just have that, you just do 51 or 44 weeks and that is it. I've had 2 calls in the last week from universities saying, have you heard anything about 2-year tenancy lengths within universities or within PBSA? And yes, I have. There are several universities who are offering sort of 2 years in particular. I haven't seen a 3-year yet, but offering 2 years. And that is because it is, as every university will attest, it is much harder to fill your rooms this year. And it has been, post-COVID ultimately, after the bounce that we had. So the last 2 years have actually been really tough. There are a lot of universities sitting on a lot of voids. And one of the ways to encourage, longer tenancy lengths ultimately is to say, well, we'll freeze your rents. We don't have to worry too much about, the increases, etc., that PBSA probably would. So we'll freeze your rents and we'll do a 2-year tenancy length and away you go. So I think that, yes, most of the time we're talking with flexibility about having shorter tenancy lengths and breaking it into semesters or whatever that might look like. I think this is going to be a model that really takes off, especially amongst universities, where they can say to people, look, we know we're going to have space because of the various different factors that are coming into play with international students in particular, and some of those accommodation guarantees that they're giving out. I'm really interested to see how much that really does take off, because I think that's a really good opportunity.
I was just thinking as well, when we're always talking about one of the key features that students look for is safety and security, have we been misunderstanding this the whole time? Do you think security means rental security and not the security of the building? And I say this as somebody who, has worked in the property industry for like 23 years and it's only just occurred to me. So I'm not showering myself with glory with that one. But I wonder if it does, based on what the Homeviews report is saying, that came out really strongly about a reason why people don't want to rent, because they don't think there's security in tenure, that actually that's what they mean.
And I wonder if maybe that would affect the HMO sector more than it would BTR, because if you're in a big BTR, if you're in a Moda or a Native or somewhere like that, you're probably going to feel fairly reassured that it's not going to be sold from underneath you. Whereas if you're in an HMO at the moment, or you're moving into a student HMO, whether you're a student or just a general resident, I'd be pretty concerned, given that a lot of landlords are looking at, I say a lot of landlords, there are landlords looking at selling up because of the EPC legislation, because of the Renters' Rights Act or Reform Bill or whatever it's called. I can't remember these days. But yeah, I think that's something really interesting to watch.
But going back to the podcast that we recorded a couple of weeks ago where we analysed the report from Housing Hand, is the tenants don't know that the Renters' Rights Bill's coming. They don't know anything about it. So they're probably not worried just yet, but they might get more worried. So those messages, and we've talked very much about how student accommodation needs to be more PBSA, be more student focused to compete with BTR, and that still stands really. Is actually, we talked about, why is accreditation not talked about? Well, that symbolises security in tenure, and we're still not seeing those messages about being fully managed and what that actually means. We're still in PBSA and clearly in BTR as well. We're still talking about cinema rooms and rooftop terraces and bowling alleys and dining rooms. We're not talking about the things, and we started this conversation, I think, talking about how somebody feels. Well, actually, doesn't everyone just want to feel safe and secure where they live? And they're the things that we're not talking about enough.
Right, it's Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and that's, if you fear that you're going to get kicked out of your home, or you don't have the control to stay in your home for as long as you need to, that's going to be a constant worry to you and a source of anxiety. So I think, the more that we can speak about that, the better. So if you haven't seen that report, please do go and have a look at it. There's a lot of data in there. So do go to Homeviews website and find that report. Right, that's a wrap for today. So thank you to my student halls for being a headline sponsor for the season. Support is hugely appreciated. And of course, thank you to Utopia and Wash Station for coming on board for season 4. We're grateful for your support. If you work in PBSA, BTR, co-living, HMOs or university accommodation sectors and enjoy our weekly podcast, please give it a rating and review it to your podcast channel of choice. I think we are off for a lunch altogether, and I'm sure this conversation will continue, but we hope to see you next week.